Welcome to the AEN Stories channel.
I've spent most of my adult life staring at the same strip of water and pretending it was simple. From the outside, the ocean looks like a postcard, blue, flat, maybe a few whitecaps if the wind wants to show off. People come down to the pier, take pictures, post them with captions about peace and freedom and little anchor emojis. Then they go home. My name is Daniel Price. I'm 45 years old, a captain in the United States Coast Guard, and I've seen that same stretch of water throw boats around like toys, take lives, give them back, and hide things that were never meant to be here in the first place. I've pulled fishermen off half-sunk hulls at 3 in the morning. I've zipped up body bags. I've stared at a radar screen until my eyes felt like sandpaper. I've watched a storm line crawl across the display and known I was about to have some of the worst hours of my life. For most of that time, I was sure of exactly two things: I knew the sea, and I knew my wife. Her name is Lily. We met on a pier too, different one, same smell of salt and diesel and seagulls that sound like they've been smoking since Nixon. I was a junior lieutenant then, proud of my first set of orders that put me in charge of something bigger than paperwork. She was a young veterinarian who'd taken the job at the local clinic because she wanted to be near the harbor seals at the rehab center. I remember watching her cradle a sedated Labrador on the dock like it was a kid, explaining calmly to a panicked fisherman that yes, the dog would be fine. No, the dog did not need beer to calm his nerves. I told her Coast Guard gallows humor, "If you ever need a ride out to see your patients," I said, "we've got boats that don't sink. Most days." She smiled with her whole face. "I'll take you up on that," she said. We were married 2 years later in a small church a mile from the harbor. Half the guest list wore uniforms. The other half smelled faintly of kennel shampoo. It was a good mix. If you've never been in the service, it's hard to explain what it's like to try and build a normal life around duty schedules. Birthdays get moved. Holidays get missed. Dinner is at 6 unless the radio says otherwise. I was gone a lot. Patrols, trainings, joint operations, you name it. Lily said she understood. For a long time, I believed she did. She'd text me when I was underway, a picture of a cat doing something stupid at the clinic, a photo of the sunset from our porch, a shot of the harbor with the caption, "Bring me something pretty from out there." I'd send her pictures of the deck in bad weather, or the bow knifing through waves, or the guys half asleep in the mess with mugs of coffee and dead eyes, and she'd reply with heart emojis and jokes about how we were just seagoing toddlers with bigger toys. We weren't perfect. Nobody is. But we had a rhythm. I'd come home salty and exhausted, she'd bring me up to speed on the land side of life. We had a little house with a view of the water if you craned your neck just right. We had a dog named Radar who loved her more than me and didn't lie about it. If you'd asked me then what my biggest fear was, I'd have said losing someone on a rescue. I wouldn't have said losing her. The first cracks in the hull weren't dramatic. That's the funny part. No big fight, no slammed doors. Just drift. She started carrying her phone everywhere. That in itself wasn't strange, everybody does that. But the way she did it changed. Face down on the table. Screen brightness turned low. The little flinch when it buzzed and I glanced over. "New clinic app," she said when I asked once. "Everything's on here now. Schedules, meds, client messages. It's annoying." I nodded. I didn't press. At sea you learn not to jump at every wave. Then there were the comments. We'd be sitting on the porch, me trying to unwind, her scrolling. I'd start telling a story about aborting, names and details stripped out, just the broad strokes. Guy with too many empty life jackets and not enough brain cells. A boat overloaded with people trying to pretend they weren't terrified. The usual. "Honestly, Dan," she said once, not looking up, "you sound like an old man telling Navy stories at a bar." "I am an old man telling sea stories on a porch," I said. "Your point?" She smiled, but it was thin. "It's just sailors are all the same," she said. "Same jokes, same bravado, same we almost died but didn't stories. It gets old." "I'm in the Coast Guard," I said. "Technically, we're not sailors, we're guardians." "I know," she said. "Semantics. I spend all day dealing with actual life and death. Sick animals, crying owners. Then you come home and act like you're Hemingway because you found one more drunk boat. The words hit harder than they should have. I shut up. Told myself she was tired. Told myself I'd been repeating myself anyway. Old guys do that. The distance grew. She started going out more. The clinic's expanding, she said. I have to meet with suppliers, property managers, all that grown-up stuff. You wouldn't like it. Maybe I wouldn't have. I know how to board a freighter at night. I do not know how to negotiate a lease. But little things bothered me. How she'd dress up more for meetings than she had for most of our date nights in the last year. How she'd fix her hair in the hallway mirror and say, "You don't get it, Dan. People in business actually care how you present yourself." What am I? I asked once. Chopped fish? You're military, she said. You get respect just for wearing that uniform. She made it sound like a trick I'd pulled. Then there was the pier. We have one main commercial pier in town. Local business owners like to walk there with coffee in the mornings and pretend they're in some coastal magazine spread. I was back from a patrol, going stir-crazy at home, so I took Radar down to walk the planks and listen to the gulls complain. I saw her before she saw me. She was standing near the end, leaning on the railing, laughing. Not the polite laugh she gave clients. The laugh she used to give me when I came home and told her how a 40-knot gust had tried to peel my eyebrows off. Next to her was a man I knew by sight, Victor Hall. Local businessman. Owned a marina, a couple warehouse spaces by the port, and a reputation for cutting corners sharp enough to slice hulls. Shook hands at charity dinners. Sponsored little league teams. Always had just enough legal work to keep him on the radar without pinging any one agency's alarms too loudly. He was standing a little too close. Her hand was on his arm. There's a particular kind of cold that hits you when you're underway and a wave breaks wrong over the bow, slides down your collar, and finds its way between your shoulder blades. Seeing them together felt like that. I stopped. Radar, oblivious, kept sniffing a piling. I could have turned around. Could have pretended I hadn't seen. Could have saved myself a lot of immediate pain and bought myself more slow burn years. Instead, I walked towards them. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Small harbor." They both turned. Lily's face went through 3 changes in half a second. Surprise, irritation, something that looked uncomfortably like guilt. "Dan," she said. "What are you doing here?" "Walking the dog," I said. "What are you doing here?" Victor recovered first. He stuck out a hand like we were at some networking event. "Captain Price," he said. "Good to finally meet. Lily's told me a lot about you." "I'll bet she has," I said, not taking it. Radar growled, which, in retrospect, is when I should have just hired the dog as my therapist. "We were just talking about some opportunities," Victor said smoothly. "Expansion. Partnerships. That sort of thing." "On the pier," I said. "With that dress code." Lily exhaled sharply. "Don't be petty," she said. "This is business." "Is that what we're calling it?" I asked. There it was, the moment where you either tell the truth or keep lying until you forget which is which. She chose option B. "You never get it," she said, turning fully to me now. "You're always out there, chasing boats, pretending you're the only one who does anything that matters. I'm here, actually building something. And I have to do it with a husband who is never home." "I've been gone like this since we met," I said. "You knew the schedule. It didn't change." "I changed," she snapped. "I'm tired of waiting around, of eating alone, of listening to another 10-minute story about some idiot who didn't wear a life jacket. I can't live with a man who's never home." "That's not what this is about," I said. "You could have said that before you came down here to meet him like a bad movie." "Don't do this," she said. "Not here." Victor held up his hands. "I'll give you guys a minute," he said. He walked away, but not very far. Just enough to pretend. I looked at her. Really looked. She was dressed for him, not for me, hair done, makeup in that specific way she used for big meetings, heels that would have snapped on our porch steps. "Is there something you want to tell me?" I asked. My voice didn't shake. I was proud of that, in a twisted way. She stared back, jaw clenched. "I want to tell you that I'm done being the wife who waits," she said. "I'm done playing support staff so you can feel like a hero. Victor is offering me a life where I matter. Where I'm not just the person who keeps the house from falling apart while you're off chasing shadows." "I've pulled actual people out of the water," I said. "They weren't shadows." "I don't care," she said. "Not anymore." Radar whined softly. I felt like joining him. "There's a rule in my line of work: when you're taking on water, you deal with the leak before you worry about who left the valve open." That morning at the pier, my marriage was the ship. I was staring at a hole. I didn't yell. Didn't make a scene. It wouldn't have helped. I just nodded. "Okay," I said. "Got it." I walked away. I could feel her eyes on my back. I didn't turn around. For a while after that, I went through the motions like a man sleepwalking. I didn't leave her that day. I didn't file for anything. We had the kind of half-conversations people have when they're too tired to fight and too scared to decide. "We can figure it out," she said once, arms crossed, eyes somewhere over my shoulder. "Maybe counseling. Maybe something." I thought about all the times she'd already chosen to not talk to me before walking down that pier. I thought about the look on her face when she said sailors are all the same. "I don't think we is what you're chasing," I said. I slept on the couch that night. Then on the boat for a couple rotations when we had back-to-back patrols. It was easier than being in the same house with a silence that loud. I've seen big men cry quietly in the dark after a rescue gone wrong. I've seen parents fall apart on docks. I didn't cry. I went numb. I stopped going down to the water on my days off. Stopped watching the horizon from our porch. Even Radar choosing seaweed over his actual food didn't make me smile. The ocean, which had always been a kind of church for me, turned into a reminder: this is why you're alone. Then, one night on duty, we got a call about a small boat overdue. "Probably nothing," the watchstander said. "Probably a guy fell asleep at anchor." But probably is not a word we rely on much, so we went. We found the boat a few hours later, engine dead, drifting. 2 guys on board, both alive, both embarrassed. We hauled them in, checked them out, towed them back toward port. Standard. On the way in, I was up on the bridge, watching the shoreline lights appear and grow. The helmsman looked over. "You good, skipper?" he asked. "You've been quieter than usual." "I'm fine," I said. The most useless sentence in the English language. He shrugged. We rode in silence for a bit. Then he said, "You know, sir, my old man used to say, you can't spend your whole life dragging people back to the dock and then drown yourself out of stubbornness." "Your old man sounds like he talked too much," I said. "Yeah," he said. But he wasn't wrong. That line stuck in my head, rolling around like a loose wrench. I thought about all the times I had leaned over the rail, hand outstretched, telling someone, "I've got you. Take my hand." I thought about the kids at the harbor who stared at our boats like they were spaceships, the way their eyes lit up when I'd visit their class and talk about what we did. And I thought about how I'd let one person's betrayal turn all of that into background noise. I've spent half my life saving other people, I thought. Maybe it's time to save myself. It wasn't a battle cry. It was a quiet realization, like checking a chart and admitting you've been steering a few degrees off course. Once that feeling set in, I started seeing things more clearly. Including Victor. His name kept coming up in briefings. Not as a target, not directly. Just around. He owned a couple of warehouse spaces near the port. He had a marine supply business that always seemed to have inventory in motion. He sponsored fuel for some local boats in exchange for advertising. All normal on paper. But sometimes, on night patrols, we'd see vessels leaving or approaching his docks at odd hours. Nothing illegal about that, not on its own. Water doesn't close at 9. But when you've been in the game long enough, some things ping the radar in your head even when they don't ping the official one. Add to that the fact that Lily was suddenly consulting for him, helping with his pet-related ventures, she said, whatever that meant, and it started to smell like more than just awkward romance. Smugglers aren't usually movie villains with scarred faces and foreign accents. They're local guys with good haircuts and legitimate businesses who figure the risk is worth the margin. Drugs, counterfeit goods, illegal wildlife, whatever makes money and can fit in a crate. And they always think they're smarter than the Coast Guard. I didn't know exactly what Victor was moving, or if he was moving anything. But I knew this: if he was, and Lily was tied to him financially, then my personal shame had just become a professional problem. I wrestled with that longer than I'm proud of. There's a deep part of you that doesn't want to make your private mess part of a case file. There's another part, the one that put on a uniform at 22 and swore an oath, that doesn't care how embarrassing it is if the law's being broken. In the end, duty won. It tends to, if you feed it. I didn't go digging as a Coast Guard captain. That would have been an abusive position. I went as a guy with friends on the docks. One of those friends is Miguel. He runs a small tug outfit out of our port. His boats help bigger vessels dock, push barges around, that sort of thing. He knows the moods of the harbor the way I know the moods of the sea. We've been swapping bad coffee and worse jokes for 15 years. One afternoon, I found him in his usual spot, leaning against a bollard, watching his crew work like a man whose back has done enough labor for one lifetime. "Hey," I said. "Got a minute?" "For you, Captain?" he said. "I got 3 meters running, though." We talked about small stuff first. Weather. The new kid on his crew who kept forgetting which line to grab. Eventually I steered it where I needed to go. "You do much work with Victor Hall?" I asked. Miguel snorted. "Define much," he said. "We move his boats when he pays his bills on time. Lately, he's been inconsistent." "Inconsistent how?" "Sometimes he's early, sometimes we have to chase him," he said. "Sometimes he needs everything done quiet. Night moves. No paperwork. That's not my style." "No paperwork," I repeated. He looked at me. "You asking as my drinking buddy or as the guy who can make my life annoying with inspections?" he asked. "Neither," I said. "I'm asking as a man whose life is already annoying and doesn't want to watch our port turn into a free-for-all." He studied my face, saw something there he recognized, and sighed. "Come on," he said. "I'll show you something." We went to his little office, a glorified shack with a desk, a coffee pot that had seen more crimes than I have, and a filing cabinet that might have been older than me. He pulled out a folder. Inside were photocopies of port movement logs. Names of vessels, times, berths. "Officially," he said, "these are the movements the harbor master knows about. Unofficially." He pulled out another folder. Handwritten notes, his own logs. "These are the calls I've gotten off the books," he said. "Tugs requested at 2 in the morning for maintenance dose from Victor's docks to a couple of private marinas up the coast. No cargo manifests filed. No customs notifications." "That's not illegal by itself," I said. "But it's interesting." "And this," he said, sliding over a stack of invoices. "He pays in cash half the time. The amounts don't match the regular schedule rates. And every time I ask why, he smiles and says, 'You don't want to know.'" "I do want to know," I said. "Yeah," Miguel said. "That's why I made copies." One of the invoices had a note on it in a handwriting I knew better than my own, Lily's. She'd scribbled "approved" next to a payment line. I stared at it longer than I needed to. The ink was just ink. The meaning was heavier. "Does Lily work with him on this stuff?" I asked, forcing the words out. Miguel hesitated. "Cap," he said, "I don't like getting in people's marriages. But since you're asking, I've seen her at his warehouse a lot. Clipboards, checking off shipments. I assumed she was doing some kind of consulting. Didn't think it was my business. Until the hours got weird and the tug requests got weirder." He tapped the paper. "Whatever this is," he said, "it's not just a guy trying to move extra dog food at midnight." I took a breath, slow. "Can I get copies of all of this?" I asked. "Already made them," he said, opening a drawer and pulling out a labeled envelope. "For Daniel, in block letters. "You knew I'd come?" I asked. "I knew somebody would need this," he said. "Figured if it was you, at least you'd know what to do with it." I went home with that envelope feeling like I was carrying a live grenade. Spread out on my kitchen table, the pattern sharpened. Late-night movements. Invoices that didn't match manifests. Payments routed through shell entities that had no reason to exist except to muddy waters. I'm not an investigator by trade. We have guys for that. But I know enough to know when something smells like smuggling. I also knew this: if I tried to handle it quietly, as Daniel the husband, I'd end up looking like a jealous man trying to trash his wife's boyfriend's business. If I handled it officially, as Captain Price, I'd be knee-deep in conflicts of interest. So I did the only thing that made sense: I went up a level. Every port has federal agencies in its orbit. Customs and Border Protection. Homeland Security Investigations. Sometimes the DEA, depending on what's flowing through. We work with them all the time. We share intel, coordinate operations, sit through the same PowerPoints. I reached out to a contact at HSI, a guy named Keller I'd done joint ops with. We'd been in enough bad weather together to skip the pleasantries. "Got something you need to see," I told him. "And a disclaimer, it involves my wife's employer. And possibly my wife." "That's one way to get my attention," he said. "You available to come into the field office, or you want me to swing by the base?" "Let's do your place," I said. "I don't want this in my workspace. Yet." We met in a conference room that smelled like coffee and toner and the faint desperation of all government facilities. I laid out the documents. Explained what I knew, what I suspected, where the gaps were. I told him about Victor's business pattern, the tug logs, the mismatched invoices, the late-night moves. I said as little as possible about my marriage. Enough to explain why Lily's name was on some of the papers. Not enough to make it sound like a vendetta. Keller listened, flipping pages, asking questions. He's good at that, making you explain your assumptions until they stand or fall. When he was done, he sat back. "You realize," he said, "if this pans out, your wife could be looking at charges. Accessory, conspiracy, maybe more." "I realize," I said. "You also realize," he went on, "that if you hadn't come to us and we find out later you knew about this, your career is screwed." "I realize that too," I said. "I'm not here because I enjoy this." He nodded. "All right," he said. "Here's what we'll do. We'll open a preliminary case. Quiet. We'll pull customs data, see what's actually been moving through his warehouses. We'll task some surveillance on his docks. We'll run the shell companies. You stay out of it." "I can give you context," I said. "Old habit. Wanting to stay in the fight." "You can give a statement if Internal Affairs asks why you brought this to us," he said. "Otherwise, you go back to rescuing drunks and breaking up lobster poaching. If anyone asks why you were here, tell them we were coordinating on joint exercises." "Fair enough," I said. He hesitated. "For what it's worth," he said, "you did the right thing bringing it forward. Some guys wouldn't." "Some guys don't take oaths seriously," I said. "I do. Even when it sucks." The next few months were long. On the surface, nothing changed. I still put on the uniform. Still did patrols. Still signed leave chits and maintenance forms and sat through briefings about budgets that never quite matched the needs. At home, Lily and I drifted from Cold War to armistice. We didn't fight much. We didn't talk much either. She spent more and more time at the warehouse or with clients. I spent more and more time staying late at the base, working out in the small gym until my muscles were too tired to think. Occasionally I'd get a text from Keller, still digging. Can't say more yet. He's a man of few words when it counts. Then, one Friday afternoon, my office phone rang. It was him. "You free to talk?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "We're moving," he said. "Just wanted you to hear it from me before it hits the local news." I closed my door. "What did you find?" I asked. "Short version?" he said. "Your instincts were right. Longer version, Victor's been using his warehouses to move contraband. Counterfeit electronics, some off-the-books pharmaceuticals, maybe a little dope. Nothing huge. He's not Pablo Escobar, he's a mid-level opportunist. But he's been clever about it. Splitting loads, using legitimate shipments as cover, paying off a clerk or two to look the other way. And Lily? I asked. He exhaled. She's not just doing neutral admin work, he said. We've got emails from her discussing sensitive shipments, advising him on how to label things to avoid extra scrutiny, coordinating with one of the corrupt port officials. Money's been routed into her accounts through a consulting front. I closed my eyes for a second. It didn't help. Is there any chance she didn't know what she was doing? I asked. My voice sounded small. I think she knew enough, he said. Maybe she told herself it was all gray area. But there's at least one message where she says, if this gets flagged, I'm out. I'm not going to jail for your greed. That tells me she understood there was a line. And you're arresting them? I asked. Warrants are being served as we speak, he said. His warehouses, his house, his accounts. We've got enough to seize assets. There's a warrant for her arrest too, on conspiracy and aiding and abetting. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Where? I asked. He paused. Her clinic, he said quietly. We wanted to catch her somewhere controlled. Local PD is doing the physical pickup. We'll handle the rest. I pictured her in that clinic, holding some old lady's terrier, thinking about anything but consequences. I pictured squad cars pulling up outside. I appreciate the heads up, I said. Daniel, he said, if you want to take leave, or if you need to talk to. I have a patrol briefing in 10 minutes, I said. My crew doesn't care that my personal life is a dumpster fire. They care that I know what I'm doing on the water. Understood, he said. We'll keep you in the loop as much as we can. And for the record? You did the hard thing. Not many people do. We hung up. I stared at the wall for a minute, then stood, adjusted my uniform, and went to the briefing room. We had a small patrol scheduled, harbor checks, some training maneuvers offshore. I ran through the plan, answered questions, made sure everyone knew their roles. I did my job. Later, when the patrol was over and the boat was moored, I checked my phone. The local news had the story already, local businessman arrested in federal smuggling sting. Photos of Victor being let out of a warehouse in cuffs, head down. Another headline a little further down, area veterinarian charged as co-conspirator in smuggling operation. They'd used her staff photo from the clinic's website. White coat, stethoscope, warm smile. The photo editor, I'm sure, thought they were just grabbing the clearest image. There were words like alleged and investigation. There were quotes from worried pet owners and shocked neighbors. I didn't read the comments. I'm not that much of a masochist. That night, the house felt emptier than it had any right to. Her toothbrush was still in the bathroom. Her mug still in the sink. The TV remote on her side of the couch. I sat at the table and stared at my hands. They've thrown lines, hauled survivors, signed orders. Now they'd handed over papers that helped put my wife in a cell. I can't tell you I felt righteous. I didn't. I felt tired. But under the fatigue, under the shame, there was a small, steady thing. I hadn't lied to myself. Not this time. The legal process did what it does, slowly, loudly, messily. Victor's business crumbled under the weight of asset seizures and frozen accounts. Warehouses got new locks. Boats got impounded. His lawyers made noises about overreach. The facts didn't care. Lily took a plea. Her attorney was decent, I heard that through the grapevine. She cooperated to a point. She admitted enough to avoid trial, enough to get a reduced sentence, but not enough to make herself look like a mastermind. Because she wasn't. She was an accomplice who'd convinced herself she deserved more than she had and that the shortcut was worth it. I didn't attend the hearings. It would have turned into a spectacle. The newspapers wrote her up as the vet who strayed. They loved the angle. Trust me, nobody hates a narrative more than the people whose lives get flattened into one. She wrote me one letter from county lockup. It was 3 pages long. Apologies, rationalizations, memories. "I never meant for it to go this far," she wrote. "I just wanted to feel important." I read it once, folded it back into the envelope, and put it in a drawer. I didn't write back. Not out of cruelty. I just didn't have anything left to say. We divorced quietly, through attorneys, like people who had once known each other well and now only knew each other's signatures. There were no kids to fight over. Just property, accounts, a dog who made the choice for us by following me from room to room and whining when I picked up my sea bag. Life went on. As it always, infuriatingly, does. The Coast Guard did its own internal review, of course. They wanted to make sure I hadn't misused my position. I sat in a room with an investigator, told them exactly what I'd done and why. They concluded I'd followed protocol by taking the information to another agency and recusing myself from operational involvement. "Would you do it again?" the investigator asked at the end, pen hovering. "In a heartbeat," I said. "Maybe faster." I think that answer helped as much as any policy memo. A couple of years passed. I threw myself into my work, but differently than before. Less as an escape, more as a purpose. I mentored junior officers. Took on the unglamorous projects. Spent more time in the community talking about what we do and less time assuming people understood. I learned something I should have known 20 years earlier: being a good officer isn't just about steering the boat, it's about what you do when the compass spins. Somewhere in there, the message came down from the district: the current base commander was retiring. They were considering candidates. My name was on the list. I didn't think I'd get it. I still saw myself as the guy whose life had blown up public enough to be office rumor fodder. But the selection board sees things differently. They look at your performance, your record, your decisions when it counted. They called me into the CO's office one afternoon. "Price," he said, "you ever think about what you'd change if you were in my chair?" "Every time someone makes me fill out a new form," I said. He cracked a smile. "Congratulations," he said. "Start thinking harder. You've been selected to take command of the base when I take off this uniform for good." I sat there for a second, letting it sink in. "Sir," I said. "Thank you. I won't pretend I saw that coming." "We did," he said. "You've been doing the job in pieces for years. Now you get the title and the headaches." Command is a strange thing. On paper, it means you're in charge. In practice, it means you're responsible. For everything. Boats, budgets, broken coffee machines, the kid who just showed up from A school and doesn't know port from starboard yet. We had a change of command ceremony, because the Coast Guard loves traditions almost as much as it loves acronyms. Flags, speeches, handshakes, my parents in the front row looking proud and slightly confused by all the ribbons on my chest. Toward the end, the district commander asked if I had a guiding principle I wanted to share with the crew as I took the helm. I thought about all the slogans I'd heard over the years. Some good, some cringe. What came out of my mouth wasn't planned. It had been rattling around in my head since my own life hit heavy seas. "Calm seas never made a strong man," I said. "Or a strong crew. We don't grow in the easy days. We grow when it's rough and we choose to do the right thing anyway." The phrase stuck. It ended up on a little plaque outside my office. The guys made t-shirts. Somebody painted it in small letters on the bulkhead in the mess. It sounds like a motivational poster. Maybe it is. But it's also true. I don't tell everyone the story behind it. They don't need all the details. They just need to know that when things get ugly, on the water, at home, inside their own heads, they're not the first ones to go through it, and they won't be the last. Sometimes, when my day is more emails than adventure, I take a walk down to the pier. The sea is still the sea. Tourists still lean over the rail to take photos. Kids still point at our cutters like they're seeing dragons. The surface still looks deceptively simple. Every once in a while, I see a couple standing where I once stood with Lily and Victor. Sometimes I want to walk over and tell the guy, "Pay attention." Not just to her, but to what you're pretending not to see. I don't. People have to steer their own ships. What I do is make sure that, on my watch, this port is as clean as I can help keep it. That my crews have what they need. That if some new victor starts thinking the water is an easy way to make a quick buck, he's got a harder time than the last one. And when I stand on the bridge wing of my base's main cutter as she leaves the harbor, wind in my face, salt on my lips, I feel something I thought I'd lost for a while: peace, not because my life is calm, but because I know who I am in the storm. I used to think the worst thing that could happen to me was a mayday I couldn't answer in time. Turns out, sometimes the mayday comes from your own living room. Maybe that's why, when young recruits report in and ask me for advice, I tell them two things. First, do your job right when nobody's watching. That's the only part that really counts. Second, the ocean will teach you a lot. About wind, waves, charts. But the hardest lessons you'll learn are about yourself. Don't ignore those just because they hurt. Most of them nod like they understand. Most of them won't, not yet. That's okay. The sea is patient. Life is, too, in its own unforgiving way. As for me, I still live in that little house near the harbor. Radar's older now, gray around the muzzle, but he still beats me to the door when I pick up my bag. On quiet evenings, I sit on the porch and watch the water. I can look at it again. It's not simple. It never was. But I know where I stand. Calm seas never made a strong man. I've had enough rough water to last a while. Turns out, I'm still here. Thank you for listening my story. If you want more raw, real, and gripping stories like this one, subscribe to the AEN Stories channel. Your support keeps these stories alive.